Good evening, everyone. It's Rabbi Dr. Jack Cohen. I welcome everyone back to part 5 of our series on the river, the kettle, and the bird. Tonight we're going to study the attitude of gratitude. Before I get into tonight's discussion, I always like to put it out there to encourage everyone to put up their resume on Shidduch Profiles Plus. Used to be called Partners in Shidduchim. It's a great platform to put up your resume. You'll be getting noticed. Many shadchanim go on there. I use it extensively. It's been tremendously successful for myself. Again, Shidduch Profiles Plus, put up your resume, a resume of your children, a resume of a friend, or encourage them to put it on, and they'll get nice exposure. Okay, here we go. If anybody has questions out there in the world on dating with Shalom Bayis, needs my help in getting matched up, if you'd like to get a copy of the PDF on what to ask questions on a date, please feel free to reach out to me. I'd be delighted to share it with you. Or if you're in the middle of a Shalom Bayis issue and need some direction, it's my pleasure. You can call me at 305-206-1916. Again, 305-206-1916. Or send me an email to drjackcohen18@gmail.com. So, some introductory remarks before we get into the whole area of gratitude, and that is like this. According to one of the great sages, the Vilna Gaon, marriage has not arrived at its ultimate purpose until husband and wife can create a nice kesher or bond between them, which is strong enough to make them feel that they're two parts of one. As they say in Hebrew, ishtoke gufo, when it's like the woman feels like it's his body. They need to feel like they're one unit. They're living for a common purpose. They have a common agenda. Our sages teach us that man and woman were created as one body, but Hashem sundered them into male and female beings, and He split them up. His plan originally was that they would end up as two separate entities. Why then did God create them at first as one unit if we would ultimately just divide them? Wouldn't it have been much simpler to have created man and woman from the outset in accordance with the plan as two individual entities? Why was it important that when we hear the word in Hebrew called ha'adam, our great commentator Rashi tells us that first creation was a combination of male and female together until God ultimately divided them. And the Vilna Gaon, one of the great minds in Jewish learning and philosophy, explains as follows: that God created them as one unit in order that there should exist a love and brotherhood between them closer than between brothers or sisters or relatives. That they really feel like as if they're one body, so that even if you divide them, but they'll be in their subconscious thinking, they used to become, or they used to be part of one entity. And that's how it has to be between a man and a woman, between husband and wife. In other words, although God's original plan was for man and woman to exist as two entities, He ultimately caused them to be created them as one organism in order to implant with them this concept, this sensation of what it feels like to be part of one body. That's how it has to be when we're together with our spouses. With this sensation in their subconscious, they would find it easier to create between them a love deep than any love in existence, even though they ultimately were separated, but by coming back together again, they were going to reestablish that feeling that they had when they were one unit. And that's important. How do you go about creating such a great relationship? And the Vilna Gaon, this great mind, offers us guidance on this matter. There he says, there are 4 basic causes or catalysts that encourage or are cataclysmic or help motivate love or create love. 1, we love someone who gives us physical pleasure. That's one reason that would be a cause of love. 2, we love someone who assists us in accomplishing our goals. If someone helps me accomplish my goals, I will love that person. C, another cause of love, we love someone in whom we recognize wonderful or noble qualities of character. That's a person that I would come to love. And lastly, what creates love? We love someone for no conscious reason other than we sense that they love us because of the giving they give to us. Creating love, ladies and gentlemen, in a marriage requires one or more of these catalysts to be operating. Either we love someone who gives us physical pleasure, or we love someone who assists us in accomplishing our goals, or we love someone whom we recognize qualities of noble character, or we love someone for no reason other than the fact that we see that they love us. So here we go. So creating love in a marriage requires one or more of these catalysts to be operating. It would seem so simple to create love that one wonders why there are so many people in the world who hate each other, who come to divorce. The reason for this is that these 4 catalysts operate only if the following preconditions are met. So you have to listen up, this is very important. What are these preconditions that need to be met in order for one of these 4 catalysts to be able to operate and thrive and create love? And that is, we need to be able to feel gratitude, which we're going to talk about later in today's class. That's important. We need to feel gratitude and we need to express it. We need to have goals in our lives. What am I living for? What's my purpose? One of the things we should pray for to Hashem every day is, Hashem, why did you create me? What's my purpose? We say in our morning prayers that we should not live for naught. We should not live for nothingness. There's no worse feeling in the world than when someone doesn't have a goal to live for. The famous story during the communist era when they imprisoned a Jew and they told him to turn a wheel and just keep turning it in a certain house. One day he asked one of his captors, what am I turning? Oh, on the other side that there's a mill, you're grinding the wheat. And so many people are eating because of your wonderful efforts. Once the communist empire, fell apart and it was completely decimated, he was freed. And he was eager to go outside and see all this great contraption that the wheel was connected to, that he had been part of this, whole structure of feeding people. To his dismay and shock, he goes outside of the house and he sees a wheel that's connected to nothing. He promptly had a heart attack and dropped dead. Why? For 20 years he had been turning the wheel and accomplishing nothing. So we need to be accomplishing in our life, and we need to have a goal when we go into marriage. Number 3, another precondition for successful love, creating love, is that we are not so preoccupied with our own ego that we fail to recognize the great qualities in someone else. Yes, one of the big problems we have is that someone can have such a pumped up ego that they only see themselves and there's no room in their universe for anyone else. And lastly, another precondition for love is that we're able to believe that someone else loves us. You need to be not just love, you need to be loved, capable of being loved. You need to be capable of loving someone, and you need to be capable of receiving someone else's love. Love is rare because these preconditions go against the grain of human beings who are naturally selfish. Again, if you speak to many marital counselors today and you ask them, what is the one thing that you see that is causing such disruption in marriages, it's obviously clear that it's selfishness amongst the spouses. On the other hand, if we would direct our efforts towards meeting these preconditions of loving and being loved and knowing it is to be loved, that's critical, then love between husband and wife will be much more prevalent. Okay, here we go. So let's talk about one of these critical preconditions, which is to be able to feel gratitude and express gratitude. A writer writes, I was once approached by a husband who complained that his wife was extremely negligent in caring for their home. Instead of washing the dishes and straightening up the kitchen after supper, she would sink into a sofa for the rest of the evening and read a book. And he was very disturbed about this. So when the rabbi questioned the wife about this, she readily admitted, you're right, it's all true. I do leave the kitchen, I sit down and I read a book on the sofa. The woman added that she worked 12 hours a day at 2 jobs to support the husband's study while he was in Kollel, learning in a seminary for men, and additionally was pregnant. By the time she had finished eating dinner, she had no strength left to do anything but to relax and read a book. Keep in mind, this is a woman that's working 2 jobs. Obviously, the man was guilty of gross ingratitude for what his wife was doing for him. There he was, sitting and learning, not uninterrupted, while his wife was carrying on working 2 jobs, taking care of the home and pregnant. No easy feat. Although the man was the beneficiary of extraordinary sacrifices by his wife, not only did he not feel the least beholden or grateful to her, but he was upset with his wife for not doing more for him. As we say in Yiddish or Hebrew, a ganze chutzpah. This guy had serious chutzpah. This story illustrates a common fault amongst people, an inability to properly appreciate the good which their spouses are doing for them. This inability is remarkable. In light of the enormous amount of physical, emotional, and practical benefits which most people receive from their spouses, one might expect that it should not be a difficult task to be thankful to the spouse. Unfortunately, the opposite is true. Many people go around in life ignoring their spouses or taking them for granted. First of all, this is due to the basic human inclination towards refusing to recognize favors received from others. This is the way we are. We as human beings are inclined not to acknowledge the good that others do for us. It's unfortunately planted on our DNA, and we need to fight it. It turns out to be all the more true with regards to favors that a wife does for her husband. So now, let's start tonight's discussion by asking, what causes ingratitude? Why are people ungrateful? Human ingratitude is an evil which stems from the very first human being, Adam, or Adam. Man's first sin, the source of all evil within us, originated from a refusal to recognize the good with which God had blessed Adam, or Adam. If he would not have been taken for granted the infinite good which Hashem had bestowed upon him, he never would have eaten from the forbidden tree of knowledge. He was granted everything in the Garden of Eden, but for one tree, and he wasn't grateful. A sense of gratitude would have made it impossible for the first man to have contravened God's will. His answer to God, when he asked if he ate from the tree, very clearly and vividly underscores man's ingratitude. What does Adam say to God when he was approached by God as to why he ate from the tree of knowledge? He answers stoically, "The woman whom you gave me, God, fed me from the tree that I ate." Adam was in effect saying, "I didn't ask for her. It was your idea, God. If she persuaded me to sin, it's your fault that I sinned, Hashem." Although the Torah explicitly tells us that God created woman for man's good, Adam failed to recognize the good. This ingratitude was the underlying cause of sin. What was true for Adam remains true for his descendants. Ingratitude is the fundamental source of all evils that we commit. Anyone who would pause to recognize that they owe God their very existence would never be able to go through life worshiping themselves. Millions of miracles make up our world. The miracle of nature, the miracle of life, the miracle of sight, the miracle of speech, the miracle of the movement of our joints, our hands, our fingers, our toes, our feet, the miracle of marriage, the miracle of being permitted to know God. Man's heart should be full of joy, amazement, and thankful gratitude for the bountiful world with which God has supplied us. Just think that we have Tu B'Shvat coming up on Monday. An enormous amount of species of fruits that exist. Why were they created in such amazing colors? For our benefit, for human beings' benefit, God did this. Instead, man considers all of this something which God owes him as his God-given birthright. His pride convinces him that the world exists for his sole use. As Paro said, "The river is mine, and I've created myself." Famous Devar Torah that we see the difference in the approach to life between us and between the Gentiles was when Yaakov Avinu, Jacob, had that dream, and it says it, "V'hinei Hashem omed alav," and he saw God standing over him. The Jew always sees God standing over him, and he's beholden to God. But when Paro had the dream that Yosef would later interpret for him, it says there, Paro was standing on top of the river. Keep in mind that the Nile River was the god for the Egyptians. So it's very clear to see that he was standing over the river. No, there's a point to be made here. Paro was making a statement. You are my God. You, the Nile River, are my God. And I tell you what to do. So how dare you rebel and and not overflow and allow a famine to take place in Egypt? And that's a unique difference between us, the Jews, versus the Gentile world. And unfortunately, when someone gets lost in his ego, he thinks everything's created for him and it's all coming to me. Man thus treats whatever is given to him or her as nothing more than the return of goods to their rightful owner. I mean, this Lexus is coming to me. This Mercedes-Benz is coming to me. It's an automatic. He owes no thanks for a world which belongs to him because he even takes that for granted. It's clear, therefore, why gratitude is so rare. We think it's coming to us. The same pride which does not permit man to recognize God's good mitigates against man recognizing the good bestowed by another human being. So since we're ungrateful to Hashem or God, it's so easy for us to be ungrateful to our fellow human beings. It's already encoded in our DNA from Adam. There's an additional impediment to recognizing favors that others do for us. It forces us to abandon the fantasy that we are self-sufficient and in charge of our own destiny. We like to feel that we don't need anyone's help. And so therefore, when someone does us a favor, we're not so happy to have to say thank you, because then it pierces the whole mirage that we're self-sufficient. It calls upon us to offer thanks to someone else. It obligates us to reciprocate with a good as well. Because of this, our natural inclination or reaction is to minimize or even deny the favors that are done for us, because we don't want to make it seem as if we're sufficient, we're dependent on anyone else. If gratitude to anyone is hard to manage, gratitude to a wife or a husband is all the more difficult. The favors that our spouse confers upon us exceeds those of any other person, since we live together under the same roof, so we're constantly doing good for each other, and therefore the degree of gratitude that your spouse deserves is much more painful to acknowledge and express. Furthermore, showing gratitude to a spouse is more difficult than showing gratitude to a stranger because of the false conception which most people have of marriage. As noted above, people commonly imagine that it's the natural duty of the spouse to bring unending bliss to them by satisfying their every whim. Accordingly, it's the spouse's duty to supply that person with all their needs and to do anything necessary to advance their ambitions, even to support them financially. In both directions, I see this today. It's the spouse's duty in their twisted mind to see to it that they're they're successful in all their endeavors, whether it's their studies, their business, or whatever. It's all dependent on the spouse. What happened to taking responsibility for yourself? It's the spouse's duty to do anything, anytime to make you happy. And that's a false perception. If all this is their duty, then the spouse deserves no more thanks for any favor they confer upon us than does a debtor who repays a loan to his creditor. They're only merely discharging their obligations. And that's why what happens in situations where we see a breakdown in the marriages, it's because they start to take each other for granted. The dinner that she worked so hard to serve him, no thank you. The fact that he goes to work to put food on the table and give her money to spend, no, there's no thank yous there either. And as a result, it's incremental, but it starts to lead to a fracturing of the relationship as the person and their spouse that start to take each other for granted. Remember, when it comes to a man and woman, let me just focus on the man here. A woman has no responsibility to make her husband happy. If there's any special obligation, it's the husband who has a responsibility to make her happy. As it says, "V'samachet ishto," the man has an obligation to make his wife happy. Nowhere in the Torah does it say "V'simchat ishta," that she has to make her husband happy. It's the man's obligation to make the wife happy. It's not the wife's duty to ensure that he be successful in his undertakings. It's up to him alone, to his ambition and to his determination. Furthermore, the woman has no obligation to contribute to the financial household support of the household. If you have any questions in this, I put up a fantastic lecture on around November 2021. You can go find it on Torah anytime or on YouTube. It's about the man's sole responsibility to take care and provide for the home, that the woman is under no obligation by halakha or Torah law to have to go out to work. Although a wife is required by law to perform certain household duties, it's the sole duty of her husband to support her financially. This is clearly stated in the ketuvah, or the marriage contract, which every husband gives his wife during the wedding ceremony, in which the husband clearly undertakes to feed, cherish, sustain. V'ani azun, v'ani eflach. These are the words that he uses, that are used in the ketuvah, that a man signs onto an obligation to support his wife. And it says, in the manner of Jewish husbands, which means they have to do a little better than our Gentile counterparts. Any woman who helps support the family and goes to work, which is common nowadays, does so beyond the call of her halachic duty. She's not under any obligation to work. She has every right to stop doing so when she wishes, and to have her husband earn all the income necessary to support her. So if a woman is going out there to work, to put food on the table, we have to thank her tremendously. Such a request would be enforced by any Jewish court. If she were to approach a bet din or Jewish court and say, I don't want to work anymore, by law they would have to honor that request. If a woman works out of the goodness of her heart or out of devotion to her husband's Torah learning, she deserves all the thanks in the world that would be due to a very significant philanthropist who gives a lot of money to charity. Because gratitude is a precondition to the creation of love in marriage. One must expend every effort to acquire gratitude and to learn how to express it regularly and consistently. If one will set aside a little time daily, even 5 minutes to consider all the good that you've received during the day from your spouse, gratitude will eventually become a natural reaction for you. Not only is ingratitude the source of the first sin of man, gratitude is one of the central commandments of the Torah. Among the first 10 commandments given to the Jewish people when we receive the Torah HaSinai is the requirement to honor our father and mother. This mitzvah is incumbent upon us, the children of fathers and mothers, to show thankfulness to our parents for having granted us life upon and having raised us. We can't take that for granted. The Torah is replete with examples of the primary importance of gratitude, or as we say in Hebrew, hakarat hatov, or hakaras hatov. We are enjoined to treat the Egyptians better than other peoples because we were guests in their land. Forget about, despite the fact that they killed us and they drowned our babies and they had us in servitude for 210 years. But look how far the Torah goes to demonstrate gratitude, that we have to be nice to the Egyptians, even though they enslaved us. Moshe was commanded by God himself to go and redeem the Jewish people, but he would not do so until he first approached his father-in-law Yitro, who had given him lodging, given him a daughter to marry. Before he would go to save the Jews, he had to ensure that he expressed gratitude and permission from his father-in-law Yitro. The reason for this was that he owed Yitro a debt of gratitude. Yitro had opened his house to Moshe when he escaped from Egypt to Midian. Thus, in the event of a conflict between the obligation to show gratitude to his father-in-law and the obligation to redeem the entire Jewish nation, gratitude took precedence over the mission that he was given by Hashem to go and save the people. First things first, he said, I have to ask my father-in-law and to express gratitude for all that he did for me. Moshe would not strike the Nile River to bring the plague of Tzfardim or frogs on the Egyptians because he owed the river a debt of gratitude. It saved him when he was a baby. It had saved his life when he was an infant. As we remember the famous story when his mother put him inside a little crib and he floated down the Nile and he was found by Bitya, the daughter of Paro. The concept of gratitude applies even to inanimate objects like water. Numerous sources in both the written and the oral Torah speak of the obligation of hakaras hatov, or expressing and showing gratitude. No attribute has been more discussed by the great rabbis and Musar thinkers than gratitude. How we avoid gratitude. So what makes us as human beings not want to be grateful or not want to express gratitude? We deny benefits in two ways. Here's how we avoid gratitude. Either we conveniently forget to notice or remember the good that someone does for us, or we attribute selfish motives to our benefactor. Oh, he was only doing it for his own good or her own good. Okay. In the story that we told above, where the man did not appreciate his wife, though she was working 2 jobs and she was pregnant, and she was working 10-hour shifts, there's little doubt that the husband rationalized his lack of gratitude through one or more of the following claims. He would tell himself, well, it's her duty to support me. Obviously, I'm studying Torah all day. We have a little tzaddik here. Besides, it's a woman's nature to be kind to her husband, or one need not be appreciative of someone who has to do what they have to do. In addition, she's not working for my welfare. She does it for her own good since she loves to get out of the house and be busy doing other things. That's how he rationalizes his behavior and her behavior. Furthermore, he tells himself, she wants to please me, so I will love her more. All these rationalizations are based on a misconception that his selfish motivation is an excuse for showing gratitude. But even if a wife rendered all of her favors because she's derived personal pleasure, this will not free a husband from being grateful to her. We have to still be grateful no matter what. The Egyptians, in whose land we lived and we passed through for 210 years, permitted us to live there for their own selfish interest. They didn't care about welfare, they just wanted servitude out of us. And then to enslave and exploit the Jewish people, still we're obligated to show our appreciation to them. Consider Yisro's motivation. He opened his house to Moshe because he wanted him to marry one of his 7 daughters. He had so many daughters, on the market to get married. Likewise, the commandment to honor father and mother for giving life to their child is the same. Their direct intention may very well be not to give their offspring life, but furthermore, they had no choice because of their instincts, but to raise and care for the child. Yet, the commandment of honoring our father and mother is the paradigm of the obligation that expresses gratitude. In the Talmud, we are told the story of Rabbi and his evil wife, a woman who would literally go out of her way to make her husband's life miserable. She burned his food. She refused to wash his laundry. She embarrassed and shamed him in front of his students in public. Whenever he would ask her to prepare food, she would deliberately prepare something else, not what he wanted. Despite this, when he found an item in the market which he thought she would like, he would wrap it in his kerchief and bring it to her as a gift. His colleague, Rav, could not understand this and pointed out to his dear friend Rabbi, but your wife causes you so much anguish. And Rabbi explained to his dear friend Rav, it's enough for me that she raises my children and that she saves me from sin because I have a wife to come home to and be able to be intimate with her and I don't do bad things with other women. The evil which his wife had meted out to him did not permit Rabbi to forget the good received from her. Furthermore, he felt beholden to her for the good which she did not do directly for his benefit. She did not save him from sin out of the goodness of her heart, nor did she raise his children out of her love for him, but out of her own love for her own children. An emotion she could hardly avoid. She didn't do it for him. Despite these considerations, Rabbi felt so beholden to his wife that he expressed his appreciation to his wife with gifts. And not just an occasional gift. Whenever he found something in the market which he thought his wife would enjoy, he would buy it for her, though she treated him terribly. And even though she did not reciprocate his kindness, and she continued to cook him the wrong food or burn his food, Rav Chia continued this practice because he said, it's enough that my wife raises my children and saves me from sin. If Rav Chia felt this obligation to an evil wife, and we could say his wife was evil, how much more so are we obligated to our own spouses who shower us with so many favors? The debt of gratitude one owes to one's spouse, right, is limitless. One owes their spouse a debt of gratitude simply for being there for us. Imagine the utter desolation of living alone and not having someone to whom to say an occasional word. Last week, I was fortunate enough to be on one of the famous podcast headlines with David Lichtenstein. And he asked me, is divorce life all it's cracked up to be? People say, oh, I can't wait to divorce my wife. I'm going to live a roaring life as a single. And I said to him, David, I see so many singles. Hundreds, if not thousands, have sat with me. And I could tell you one thing, it's a lonely, bitter existence. They may be expressing fun and good times, but that's not what's happening behind closed doors. That person is a constant companion, available to share every meaningful experience in life with. So a man has no greater benefactor than his wife. A wife has no greater benefactor than her husband. Even if there's little shalom bayis in the home, they're making each other's life more comfortable and pleasurable. As a wife, she shops, she launders, she straightens up the house, she prepares food. How much more so is she a benefactor of this shalom bayis? She's the closest friend imaginable. Everyone knows that. In a good marriage, you may have had many friends when you were single, but ultimately your spouse becomes your best friend. Your success is her success. Her success is your success. Your failure is her failure. Her failure is your failure. He or she are loyal and devoted to you beyond anything else in the world, without expecting anything in return, except to be appreciated and loved by the spouse. When the sages said that a woman illuminates her husband's eyes and puts him on his feet, they were not exaggerating in the least bit, over and above what we do for each other in marriage. There are even greater benefits. Everything about a household which makes it a home is due to the fact that, for example, a man has a wife. As Rabbi Yochanan said, he never called his wife my wife, but he called his wife Ishto ze beito. He called his wife his house. She creates its atmosphere. The woman creates its ambiance. The woman creates its mood. The woman ensures that it continues along its appointed path towards happiness. Administering a family requires infinite patience, and it requires wisdom. Taking care of the family and dealing with all its needs is constant decision making and emotional strength, which we all know too much of. During the course of an ordinary day, we serve each other, and the woman has a role as her children's nurturer, educator, and judge. The present and future of her family lies in her hands. Their physical and emotional stability rests upon the manner in which she cares for her children. She's sensitive to each of their individual requirements. She constantly decides which food is proper for which child, especially in today's age when so many children have various allergies. Some women have to cook 2 or 3 different meals. She has to constantly decide which food is good for each child. She's responsive to each of their emotional needs and weaknesses. She's ready to render assistance to help in coping with their fears and struggles. As their educator, it is she who inculcates their values into them, teaches them about Hashem or God. She acts as their model. She forms their attitude towards life, towards their creator, towards others, towards themselves, in addition to helping them with their homework. As their constant supervisor, the mother is always on the alert to decide who deserves punishment, who deserves reward, and how to settle the squabbles between sibling rivalry. So we can see right here, honestly considered, one can never fully repay the debt of gratitude to one's wife or to one's husband. But the least we can do is recognize and appreciate how vast and vital are the blessings that each of our spouses brings into our home, into our lives, and accordingly and correctly and appropriately show and express our appreciation. So that's our presentation for tonight. Let's review it. It's important to express gratitude, to be sensitive towards gratitude, to always do a checklist in our minds of all the good that our spouses do for us, so we never take them for granted, because once we do, God forbid, that's down the road, that leads down the precipice of disaster. We never want to do that. Let me wish everyone a good Shabbos. Shabbat Shalom. Tomorrow night we have a fantastic class called Shidduchim and Money Issues. All the money issues are involving getting married, what's involved, expenses, etc., decisions about money. It's all coming from Chaim Kanievsky's Sefer. Join us tomorrow 9 o'clock on Instagram Live. Tell your friends. And if you have any questions again on dating, shalom bayis, or need any help in any way on evaluating your relationship, simply call me or WhatsApp me at 305-206-1916. Have a wonderful evening.